The morning I found out, I was standing in our kitchen in my pajamas, holding a coffee mug that still had his name on it. A stupid little gift I'd bought him at a farmer's market 3 years ago. World's oakiest husband. I'd thought it was funny at the time. It wasn't funny anymore. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up to the part where everything still felt normal. Or at least, what I had convinced myself was normal. My husband and I had been together for 11 years, married for 8. We met in our late 20s when we were both working in the same office park in Columbus, Ohio. Him in commercial insurance, me in HR for a mid-sized tech company 2 buildings down. We used to joke that we had the most boring origin story of any couple we knew. No app, no wild coincidence. He had just borrowed a phone charger from me in the shared lobby cafe, and somehow that turned into coffee, and coffee turned into dinner, and dinner turned into a decade of a life built together. We had a house in Westerville with a detached garage he never used for cars, and a backyard we kept meaning to landscape. We had 2 dogs, Pickle and Rue, both rescues, both completely untrainable. We had a joint savings account, a shared calendar app, and a drawer full of takeout menus we still kept, even though we ordered everything online now. We had routines, Sunday grocery runs, Thursday night Thai food. The way he always set the coffee maker before bed so I'd wake up to it already brewed. I thought those routines meant we were solid. Looking back, I think I used them as a reason not to look too closely at anything else. His name was Nathan, and for the last 14 months of our marriage, I had no idea who he actually was. The signs were there. I can see them clearly now, the way you can only ever see things clearly once the fog has already lifted. He started working later. Not every night, but enough that I stopped waiting up for him. His phone, which used to sit face up on the kitchen counter while he cooked, had migrated to his pocket. Always his pocket. Even at home. Even on weekends. When it buzzed, he'd glance at the screen and flip it over in one practiced motion, like he'd been rehearsing it. I mentioned it once, maybe 6 months, before everything fell apart. We were watching TV, and I'd seen him do the phone flip for the 3rd time in an hour. "You've been on that thing all night," I said. Not accusatory. Just tired work stuff, he said. "You know how it gets in Q4. I did know. Insurance sales had busy seasons. I let it go. My friends told me I was overthinking. My sister said I sounded paranoid. I told myself they were right. Then came the night of October 14th. I remember the date because it was the day after our anniversary, which we had celebrated the way we always did. Dinner at the Italian place. On High Street we'd been going to since our first year together. The one with the candles and old wine bottles. And the owner who always remembered our names. Dinner had felt normal. Or close enough to normal that I hadn't questioned it. He'd given me flowers. We'd split a tiramisu. He'd held my hand on the walk back to the car. The next evening, a Tuesday, I made pasta from scratch. Not because I was trying to impress him. I just had time and I felt like doing something with my hands. When he came home, he sat down at the table, looked at the food I'd made, and didn't eat it. He just sat there, moving pasta around his bowl. "What's going on?" I asked. He put down his fork. "I need to tell you something." Something cold moved through my chest. "Okay," I said. He looked at the table, not at me. At the table. "I've been unhappy for a long time. I waited for more. There wasn't more. Not immediately." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means I think we made a mistake." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny. Because the alternative was to stop breathing. "A mistake," I repeated. "I don't think this is working anymore." I set down my own fork very carefully, the way you do when you're trying not to let your hands shake. "Nathan, we just had our anniversary dinner last night." "I know. You held my hand, I know. You looked me in the eye and told me you loved me." He didn't answer that one, and that's when I understood. Not just that something was wrong, but that something had been wrong for a very long time. That anniversary dinner hadn't been a real anniversary dinner. It had been a performance. And he had already decided, before the tiramisu, before the candles, before he held my hand on the way back to the car. He had already decided. "Is there someone else?" I asked, a pause that lasted exactly 1 second too long. "This isn't about someone else," he said. I looked at him for a long moment. That's not a no. He rubbed the back of his neck. I just think it's time for us to go our separate ways. We went around in circles for almost an hour. He stayed vague. I kept pressing. He said he needed space. He said he'd been feeling disconnected for years. He said I deserved someone who was fully present. He used the word trastful twice, which I found maddening. Because we had built this life together with our hands, and he was describing it like a business pivot. Eventually, I stopped asking questions. I went upstairs, took a shower, and sat on the bathroom floor for 20 minutes. That night, I slept in the guest room. He didn't try to stop me. By morning, things had shifted into something colder, more logistical. He told me he thought it would be better if I stayed with my sister for a while. He said it would give us space to figure things out. He said the house would be easier for him to manage in the interim. Easier for him. I thought about pushing back. The house had been purchased with money from both our salaries. My name was on the mortgage. But I was so hollowed out from the night before that I didn't have the fight in me. I packed a bag. Enough for a week, I told myself, just to get some distance. I'd come back when my head was clearer. I drove to my sister's house 40 minutes away and spent 2 days on her couch eating cereal and not sleeping. On the third day, I realized I had left my laptop behind. I needed it for work. I had a full performance review cycle coming up, and all my templates were saved locally. I texted Nathan to let him know I was coming back to grab a few things. He didn't respond. I assumed he was in a meeting. I had my own key. I let myself in through the side door off the garage, the one we always used because the front door lock was finicky in cold weather. The house was quiet. It was a Thursday afternoon, around 2 o'clock. I assumed he was at the office. I wasn't supposed to hear anything, but as I walked down the hallway toward the stairs, I heard music. Low and familiar, coming from the living room. A playlist I recognized. The one he played on weekend mornings when we used to make breakfast together. I stopped walking. Then I heard a voice. A woman's voice, easy and comfortable, talking about something mundane. A podcast she'd been listening to, something about true crime. Like she was settled in. Like she belonged there. My heart started going very fast. I turned the corner. She was on my couch. Curled up at the end of it, bare feet tucked underneath her, one of Nathan's flannel shirts draped over her shoulders. She had a coffee mug in her hand. One of mine, from a set my mother had given us as a housewarming gift. And she was mid-sentence when she saw me. Her face went completely white. Nathan was in the armchair across from her. He stood up so fast he nearly knocked over the side table. "You didn't text back," I said. My own voice sounded very far away. He started. I said I was coming to get my laptop. The woman on the couch stood slowly. She set down my mug. "I should go," she said quietly. "That would be great," I said. She gathered her things, a jacket from the armchair, her keys from the coffee table, a tote bag from beside the couch, my coffee table, my couch. She didn't look at me on her way out. The front door closed softly behind her. Nathan and I stood there in the living room. Pickle wandered in from the kitchen, tail wagging, completely unaware that anything was wrong. I reached down and scratched behind his ears just to have something to do with my hands. "How long?" I asked. Nathan was quiet. "How long?" I said again. He sat back down heavily. "About a year." A year. I did the math in my head before I could stop myself. A year ago, we had been talking about refinancing the house. A year ago, we had gone to his cousin's wedding in Nashville and danced until midnight, and I had genuinely thought, that we were in a good place. "Who is she?" He hesitated. "Someone I met through work." "Does she know about me?" He looked at the floor. "Did she know you were still married while she was sitting on my couch?" "It's complicated." I had heard enough. I walked to the kitchen to get my laptop from the counter where I'd left it charging. On my way, I noticed something I hadn't seen when I came in. There was a legal pad on the kitchen table, covered in Nathan's handwriting. Numbers, dates, account names. And underneath it, a folder. I pulled it open. Inside was a stack of printed documents. Bank statements. A property valuation for the house. A document from a financial advisor I had never heard of. Printed emails, some of them dated back 9 months. I stood there reading for a long time. He had started restructuring things 9 months ago. The joint savings account had been gradually drained. Small transfers. Nothing dramatic enough to trigger an alert, but consistent. $200 here, $500 there. All moved to an individual account I hadn't known existed. The financial advisor's notes referenced a plan to refinance the house in his name alone, before initiating a divorce filing. He had been planning this while we were having Thursday night Thai food, while we were walking the dogs, while he was setting the coffee maker before bed. My hands were very steady when I pulled out my phone. I don't know why. I expected them to shake. They didn't. I photographed every page. "What are you doing?" Nathan came into the kitchen and stopped when he saw me. "Getting what I came for," I said. He crossed the room and reached for the folder. I stepped back. "You don't need to, Nathan." I looked at him directly. "I have a copy of everything in this folder, and I'm going to need you to stop talking right now." He went quiet. Something shifted in his face as the loose confidence he'd had since I walked in contracted into something tighter, more careful. He hadn't expected this. I picked up my laptop, put it under my arm, and walked out. I sat in my car in our driveway for a few minutes before I could drive. Not crying, just breathing. Pickle and Rue were watching me through the front window, and I made myself not look at them because that would have undone me completely. Then I put the car in reverse and left. My sister was a nurse and had the specific quality of calmness that medical people develop over years of witnessing emergencies. When I showed her the photos on my phone, she didn't gasp. She just got very quiet and said, "Okay, first things first." First things first turned out to be several very specific things. I called my bank the next morning and requested a full account history going back 18 months. The pattern in the transfers was clear once I had the complete picture, clearer than I'd expected, actually, which my attorney later told me was both common and useful. People who think they're being clever often aren't quite as careful as they imagine. I had found an attorney through a colleague at work who had been through a divorce 2 years prior. Her name was Miss Hartley, and she was exactly the kind of person I needed in that moment. Unhurried, precise, and completely unsentimental about the law. She looked at the photos I'd taken, asked me a series of questions in a flat, methodical tone, and told me that the financial restructuring Nathan had attempted was worth examining carefully. "Dissipation of marital assets," she said, "is taken seriously in Ohio." I hadn't known that phrase before. I learned it quickly. I also hired a forensic accountant, someone Miss Hartley recommended, who spent 3 weeks pulling apart the last 2 years of financial activity. What he found wasn't just the gradual account draining. It was that Nathan had been expensing personal items through his business for the better part of a year. Dinners, hotel stays, a weekend trip to Gatlinburg in March that I had assumed was a work conference. The picture that emerged was of someone who had been systematically preparing an exit, while maintaining the appearance of a functioning marriage. Not a man who had gradually fallen out of love. A man who had made a calculation. I don't know exactly when that realization settled in, that it wasn't grief I was feeling anymore, or not only grief. It was something colder, a kind of clarity. I went back to work. I kept my head down. I didn't tell people more than I needed to. Nathan had gotten there first with some people in our shared social circle, and I understood immediately that he had shaped the story carefully. Something vague about growing apart. Incompatibility, the usual soft language people use when they don't want to say anything specific. Several friends reached out with messages that were kind but carefully neutral. The kind of message you send when you've already heard one side and you're waiting to see how the other one lands. I didn't argue with any of it. I let it sit. But I did send my sister-in-law, Nathan's younger sister, Becca, who I had always been genuinely close to, a simple message. I told her I thought she deserved to know the timeline. I attached nothing. I just told her the dates, when the transfers started, when the financial advisor was first contacted, when the Gatlinburg trip actually was, and what it was actually for. I never heard from Nathan about that message. But I heard from Becca. She called me and didn't say much, just, "I'm so sorry, and I want you to know I don't think you did anything wrong." That phone call meant more to me than I expected it to. The divorce process in Ohio took several months, which is shorter than some states and longer than others. And during that time, I moved from my sister's couch into a small one-bedroom apartment in Clintonville that had good light and a building that allowed dogs. I fought for Pickle and Rue, and I won. Nathan hadn't walked them in over a year anyway. There were difficult hearings. There were late nights with financial documents spread across my kitchen table. There was a period of about 6 weeks where I woke up every morning at 4 a.m. with my heart racing for no specific reason. I started running in the mornings, partly for the anxiety, and partly because I needed something that felt like forward movement, even when everything else felt like it was standing still. What the forensic accountant's report ultimately showed was significant enough that Nathan's attorney advised him to settle rather than go to court. The settlement took longer than I would have liked, but it included my equitable share of the marital assets, including the value of the house, which was considerably higher than it had been when we bought it, plus a portion of the funds that had been transferred out of the joint account. It wasn't everything. It's never everything. But it was fair, which is more than he had planned to give me. I signed the final papers on a Wednesday morning in April. It was raining outside. I went to lunch afterward, by myself, at a diner I liked in my new neighborhood, and I ordered eggs and coffee and sat there for an hour without looking at my phone, just watching people walk by on the street outside. There's something strange that happens after you've been through something like this. A certain kind of people, well-meaning people, people who love you, want you to say it made you stronger, or that you're grateful for the lesson, or that you've found some silver lining you can hold up so everyone can feel better about what happened to you. And maybe someday that language will feel true. I don't know yet. What I can say, sitting here now, is this: I left that marriage with nothing I hadn't brought into it. He got the house, technically, until the settlement transferred the equity. He got his secrets, he got the woman from the couch, for whatever that was worth. What I got was my financial records, my dogs, my attorney's phone number, and a very clear understanding of what I had been choosing not to see. A friend told me recently that she thought Nathan must have regretted it by now, that once the excitement of something new wore off, he must have realized what he had given up. I thought about that for a minute. Then I said, maybe. But the thing is, I don't think about him that way anymore. I don't track his regret as something I need to know about. I stopped needing him to feel the weight of what he did in order for me to feel like myself again. That, honestly, is the thing I am most proud of. Not the settlement, not the apartment, not even getting Pickle and Rue. The fact that one ordinary morning, I woke up at a reasonable hour, let the dogs out into the small yard behind my building, made coffee, and stood there in the early light, thinking about something else entirely. I had a full day ahead of me. I had built it myself, and that was more than enough.